beautifully illustrated by Charles Tunnicliffe and based on his farm and his many memories. I remember myself learning to read and how pleased you are when you manage to read through several pages consecutively. Welcome to MHA Digital Communities. My name is Mrs. Julie Longbottom. I'm an artist and a teacher, and I'd like to welcome you all to our Silk Museum. Now, I'm in my 70s now, and I'm sure that every classroom in Britain at the time when I was a little girl would have had these books in the classroom. Everybody I know has these, and we'd be learning things about each season, and there were also simple readers that children could have, all illustrated by Charles Tunnicliffe. Now, over the years of working for this museum, I have been artist in residence in local schools, and I've welcomed schools to me here in a classroom in the museum. And I try to very much teach them about Charles Tunnicliffe, and I've had some fabulous results. We're lucky in our area because lots of schools now have farm school. And whatever the weather is, children go outside and observe things, just as it would have been in Charles Tunnicliffe's early childhood. Things are very different. There would be no traffic on the roads, no planes overhead. Only travelling, for example, on our road from Macclesfield to Buxton or Leek, it would be very rare that you'd see a vehicle. You may have a horse bus or a bicycle, but very little noise. So children in those times observed things in a very different way. The constellation of the stars at night, development of birds making nests, flowers for each season. And over the years that I have been a teacher, I have been rather surprised at how many children in the modern world don't know the names of common trees and flowers. But however, I feel that things are improving, and children now are much more interested in being in nature and learning about our delightful wildlife. And over time, just before we had the COVID problems, I was involved in going to 5 different local schools, from teenagers to very young children, and each of them did some fabulous work in different techniques about Charles Tunnicliffe, and I made it into an exhibition which was seen by a lot of local people. And what was delightful was 1 or 2 of the children came to me in the morning and said that they couldn't draw, couldn't do any art. One particular boy comes to mind who had autism, quite severe autism, and he had a lady who stayed with him all day. And he came to me and said, "I cannot draw." Anyway, he did the most wonderful drawing, absolutely remarkable. And the whole class was so happy, and it was my best success in teaching because it made him glow, this little boy. One of the books I'd like to show you is the early reader, The Farm, which I think maybe some of you will remember were in your classrooms. Beautifully illustrated by Charles Tunnicliffe and based on his farm and his many memories. I remember myself learning to read and how pleased you are when you manage to read through several pages consecutively. Charles had his parents had 1 horse on the farm, which Charles was very fond of, and his father was actually quite reluctant for him to learn to ride, but he persuaded his father to allow him to do it, and he did it bareback, which was quite difficult. But he also loved to draw horses. Each of these is a beautiful picture in its own right. So I think we were very privileged to have such early readers in the quality of illustrated by Charles Tunnicliffe. I hope you've enjoyed seeing some of our artifacts in the museum, and I hope maybe it'll have taken you down memory lane. Maybe you had these books in your classroom, maybe you had an early reader, maybe you collected Brook Bond tea cards, maybe you saw magazines or RSPB magazines with pictures from this lovely artist. And I hope it will inspire you possibly to go out with new eyes to observe things in a much more observant fashion, as Tunnicliffe did. I know that my own grandchildren, quite old now, 21 down to 13, and they now, when they go for walks with me, they observe things which they wouldn't have done before.